Hi everybody! So today is going to be a little bit of a long part. It's part 6. And that's named The Question of Disability. So the first chapter, which is chapter 17, is do deaf people have a disability? The author is Harlan Lane. So disability is always perceived as a limitation. If you think long ago, it was really important to have productive citizens that always do stuff, and then because of that, they needed to separate people who can't work from people who actually can work. And even looking at capitalism, that really means that people need to have a good work ethic. So really looking at disabilities, it's different. You see what deaf means. What does deaf mean? It's actually socially constructed. If you see what is the meaning of deaf? Well, let's see, what do we think deaf people don't have a vital sense. They can't hear, so they don't have that. So that's the first of 5. So the second one is that they are really limited in choices. Third, they're limited in education. 4, that job choices are really severely limited. And then lastly, even in some countries, deaf children can't even go to school. So limitations like that limit deaf people are different. Like these 5, they're not really true. It's not like that. It's just socially constructed. So what happens is that society has these like really stereotype of these 5, that deaf people can't do things, but they're not like that. So truly, the problems that deaf people experience are made by society. So what do we need to do? We need to fight really against the meaning of disability. Here, let me move this down a little bit for my notes. Like that? Yeah. Okay, sorry. So now into chapter 18, which is titled Beyond Culture. The author is Douglas C. Bainton. Now, deaf people really physically are different than hearing people. Studies have shown that even the thought process, the visual information, deaf people process that differently than hearing people. So the difference between deaf and hearing is not only in culture. There's other differences as well. If you think about codas. So if you have a cultural model, well, really think about it. Codas, like, grow up in the deaf culture. So if if we're talking about the cultural model, they must be in it because they have those values. So, but if you think in reality, Kodas aren't in the deaf culture. They have the skills, the understanding, but they don't have the deafness. Now, if you think of another model, the ethnicity model. But it's not truly like that, because you look at an ethnicity, it comes down from generation to generation through the family, babies to parents to babies, but deaf is not like that. Disability, really oppression, recognizing this identity as disabled, we'll be naming that oppression that deaf people are under with good or bad decisions. So whether you think that it's a good decision is up to you. If we're speaking about America with the Americans with the Disabilities Act, if the deaf community refuses to identify as disabled, well, it's going to really weaken the protections and safety that brings. Deaf people having a disability means that the meanings are always changing. So now on to chapter 19, which is titled Post-Deafness. And the author's name is Leonard J. Davis. A long, long time ago, deaf people were always seen as stupid and idiots and crazy. They were seen as children without the rights of a normal person. But then that changed. Deaf people became to mean disease, not evolved as a human. So if we look at models again with this in context, deaf means what? So if we look at the ethnic model, the ethnic group, you always think of violence and really just unsafe. People are always trying to fix deaf people. So we have to realize that race is not found in DNA. If you think about the linguistic model, you can't really do that because it excludes people who don't use ASL, who don't use sign language, or even really, really marginalizes people who are victims of oralist training. If you see the ethnic model, it really limits to whoever's the perfect deaf person. So that would mean like deaf parents, deaf child. If you say deaf world, deaf culture, that allows for all deaf people to be in it. All really people. They're all included. But it's general. And it's really elastic. So really, deaf studies needs to focus on finding that identity. And now we're going down to a next part, which is chapter 20. It's the last chapter, I promise. So this is titled Postscript. And then the author is also the editor of the book. It's H. Dirksen L. Bauman. So this really focuses on the Gallaudet protest in 2006. And what this protest was doing is they're trying to find their identity. Gallaudet has been believed to be a mecca for deaf people, but studies have actually shown that the teachers there sign at an elementary school level. So it's not helping the deaf identity by having such minimal skills. Because deaf people are so diverse in their language, it's hard to really, but for Gallaudet to cater to everybody. There's so many people. And so that's why Gallaudet decided to become bilingual in ASL and English education. So Gallaudet has a really broad meaning of what ASL is, which kind of shows that they really don't want to stick to a position. Gallaudet has shown that they have really low academic standards. And really that's because some people are oral, some people are sign. Gallaudet has to cater to such a diverse population. They show ASL gain. If we show ASL gains, we can make it better for deaf studies. He concludes with that it's really important to show why America needs Gallaudet University, but more importantly, it's why the world needs deaf people and why they need their sign languages as well. It's very important. Okay, that's all.